Hello, I'm Kai Rosga, and welcome to Version Up, one lawyer's journey to digitally transform his legal practice. The AI revolution is already here. That's the bottom line from my conversation with LegalTech thought leader, educator, and founder Tom Martin. It's no longer just about tools that make lawyers more productive. What we're looking at is a transformation of what a legal service provider is. You'll notice I didn't say lawyer or law firm. Tom's theory is that every law firm is now a software company. Whether or not you agree with that conclusion, you'll be hard-pressed to find flaws in the logic that leads him to it. And the implications of this are far-reaching. Practicing lawyers, law students, startup founders, if guided by the ultimate needs of the client, the one with a legal question or need, will witness major shifts in the model for delivering those services. And if Tom is right, this is not a matter of a decade or several years, but one of a few years, or maybe even sooner. And the foundation is already shifting underneath everyone's feet today. But this is not a cause for panic or alarm. It's a moment for reflection, investment, and for embracing the opportunities that this pivotal moment presents. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I surely did. As always, views expressed on my own. Enjoy. Tom, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited to get your perspective. I've followed you on LinkedIn, and I can see that you have a pretty expansive background in this space, one that brings to the table a lot of different perspectives. And I'm excited to extract a little bit of insight and also to get to know you.
Well, I think that it's possible to accumulate a lot over 25 plus years. So, some of it is just experience and getting your hands on things. I'm a true believer in experimentation. I have loved technology. So putting that together with the law, experimenting in different ways to see how you might be able to make the practice of law more efficient by using technology. And it might not work the first time. The first idea you have might not come together, but it's about experimentation and learning from that experience. And so that's what I've done throughout my career. And so I started as a practicing lawyer, and then from that transitioned into working for myself with my own firm, solo practitioner, grew it to a small firm. But the whole time I've been working technology into it. And then thankfully about close to 10 years ago, I was able to start up my own legal tech company, LawDroid. And since then, I've really been able to pursue my passion of putting those two things together.
And do you teach as well?
Yeah, I do. I'm an adjunct professor at Suffolk Law School and had the pleasure last spring of teaching law students about generative AI and the delivery of legal services. I was very fortunate to be recommended for that by Diane O'Leary, who's a fantastic professor there. And she's actually the one who founded that class. And so I was helping her. I taught the spring semester, and I actually ended up writing a textbook about that.
I went to BU for law school. I'm very familiar with Suffolk, great school, great students. And I've also seen some of the evolution of AI courses that were maybe more substantive, but now AI courses that are actually more hands-on, more practical, more about using tools. How did that transition happen in the educational space? How do we get to the point where we have classes where we're really helping students understand how to use these tools as a practitioner?
Well, I think it is definitely a more recent phenomenon. And obviously every law school is a little different in terms of how embracing they are of AI. But I know that Suffolk has always been very progressive. That's one of the reasons why I was delighted to be invited to teach there. And they have been recognized nationally as being at the top of their game for legal tech and AI. But I really made a point of thoughtfully incorporating practical use of AI in the course. So every single class had a workbook exercise. So my textbook, there was like the talking part. Here's what this is, how it works. But then there was the workbook. And so there were workbook exercises for each and every class. And it could be them using, Claude for a little drafting. It could be using Notebook LM. to create a podcast of some material they needed to learn. I had little videos throughout for every single class where I did 15 minutes of a pre-class tutorial. And at the very end of the class, I actually made the last video with HeyGen where I cloned myself, and I didn't tell them. And I really made a point of wearing exactly the same thing every time I shot a video. So it was like a little uniform that I wore just to remain consistent. And then I trained HeyGen on that outfit. And when I told them, notice anything weird about that video? There were a few that were like, I didn't notice, man. Like, you caught me by surprise. I didn't realize that that was, AI. But it was a fun experience, I think, for me and the students.
I think sometimes people's aha moment with this technology could be something like that, right? Really want to talk about some of your technical sort of experience and background, but I'm really interested in your interaction with the students, because when I think about legal tech and AI powered tools for lawyers, to me, it seems like a moment where a law student coming into a law firm as a first year may actually have unique skills and abilities that the senior partner does not. It's almost like an inversion that we had. I didn't experience that when I left law school. It was sort of the apprentice model, and I showed up and I knew nothing substantive when I started as a lawyer, and I had to have my hand held learning the substance of the law. And frankly, almost was like a liability on some days, right? Or just someone that had to be invested in. And to me, it's almost like an inversion. You could easily imagine a situation where a student comes in and wows a senior partner by saying, look, we can do this with some technology, or we can get a better outcome with some technology.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think it's a unique moment right now. It's not always going to be like this, but you're right. Right now, and I explain this to my students, is that they have a unique opportunity to arbitrage their knowledge of AI and how this tech works against those who are already working that don't have it, right? So like you pointed out, it puts them in a unique position of being able to teach or lead the way for senior partners that aren't familiar with AI. But I say this is a moment because things are progressing very quickly. Lawyers and law firms that are already out there, they know this is a high priority. There is a good amount of them that are getting up to speed. There's a lot that aren't, but yeah, the narrative right now is, oh, well, all the juniors are going to be replaced. AI is going to be doing their job, and concern about, people graduating from law school getting jobs right now. But I do think this whole trend that we're talking about right now cuts against that and actually gives them an advantage. But I do think this is a moment, it is going to play out over the longer term, that a lot of things that juniors have traditionally been doing will get supplanted by AI. But that doesn't mean juniors will get supplanted by AI. It just means that their job description is going to change.
I guess I've observed there's a lag with these things, and it's rarely that there's an overnight shift in capacity or need. It's sort of a transition, and maybe there's less hiring. That doesn't mean there's firing, but there also could be more hiring for other kinds of roles that aren't necessarily just purely substantive legal roles. So, I mean, that's the big question is, are we growing the pie? And so far, it seems like technology has consistently grown the pie for law firms and for lawyers. Maybe not wise to bet against that trend, but what are your thoughts on the big picture 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Or are we going to see more legal services, more demand for legal services, or are we going to see sort of a contraction as clients and users start going straight to a tool without a human involved?
What I think is that a lot of lawyers confuse the business model with the need for legal services. It's true that there's going to be a contraction in the business model that's based on the billable hour, just because it doesn't make sense anymore, because tying expertise to time, it'll still work for some, edge cases, and they'll actually get to charge more because that type of expertise will become rarer. But for the most part, the billable hour is going to definitely get compressed in that it's not going to be as necessary when you have tools that can do things extremely quickly, almost instantaneously. That doesn't mean you just rely solely on what you get from AI. You do have to review it and put it in context strategically. But it also means that that business model of the billable hour is going to make a lot less sense. Value pricing, pricing based on outcome, pricing that is just flat fee, that's going to supplant the billable hour for the most part. Like I said, the billable hour will still be there for some things. And so what I said at the top of this is that some lawyers, they view that as the legal profession itself is going to go away. No, the pricing model is going to change dramatically. The need for lawyers is going to remain. And one of the things I talked about in my writing is that I think it's going to expand. And the reason why I think it's going to expand is because right now, traditionally, lawyers have been approaching what we do from a backward looking reactive model. There's a fire, we help to put it out, that we deal with these scenarios that come up. But I think what AI does is it gives us the opportunity to actually become proactive, become more involved intimately in our clients. It could be a company, their day-to-day operations. So things happen, a contract gets signed, goods get delivered, maybe they don't get delivered on time. All of these minutia can be tracked in real time. And the legal consequences of those things can be also analyzed now in real time. Will it be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect. So I know somebody's going to jump in there and go, well, but the point is that you could have this on the ground, real-time analysis of all of these things where you could dashboard it for the higher like C-suite to be tracking legal risk, as well as the firm being there to give its input strategically about what that means. And because you're more aware of everything, the full picture, there's more opportunities for lawyers and more, services that they could provide overall. So I think the move from reactive to proactive is going to open a lot of our opportunities, and that's only made possible because of AI.
I like that framing, the strategic aspect, the risk assessment, identifying gaps in your compliance program, for example, at a corporate. And I would add one other element, the human element. I think we forget sometimes how important as a lawyer internally navigating a law firm is driven by human interaction. It's social intelligence, right? Interacting with external clients, obviously extremely human, personal driven, and in-house. I'm in-house now. Wow. A large organization is extremely complex to navigate, and there's no amount of technology or processes or workflows that can replace the human aspect of selling something like a new compliance program, going out and being able to identify problems by talking to the individuals that are on the ground, experiencing those problems day to day. That human element is so important to being an effective lawyer, at least mid-level or senior level.
Well, of course I agree with you. Like we're human beings. We're talking to each other. We're, we're learning from each other. That is going to remain. And yeah, despite all these technical achievements and improvements and all that, there still has to be a person that kind of wraps around the ultimate product of that to communicate its value and to create a relationship that's based on trust and a win-win for both parties. Of course, that's going to remain. But I also don't want people to get concerned that it's going to be reduced to that, that we're just some mouthpiece going forward. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I think people really discount, I forget what law it's called, but the one where, work expands to fit the time that you have. And that's going to remain true even with AI. And the reason why is because, just like I said, that AI makes proactivity possible, it also will reveal and bubble up all these issues that we never had the time to get to. And then all of those issues you could, drill down to within and then create even more opportunities for work. So it's definitely kind of this expanding room where it just gets bigger, more of a magnifying glass you could take to it.
Email did not reduce how much I've had to work in my life. I'll tell you that. It has definitely increased my workload. I think what you just described is how I feel on a nice blue sky, clear, sunny day. Let me give you how I feel on a dark, stormy day when I'm thinking a little more cynically. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Okay.
Sure.
What if this is an alternative path here, which is right now we have these tools that are being offered to us as lawyers to make us more efficient, help us go up the value chain, et cetera. But these tools are going to learn from us, and we are going to make these tools better as the tools make us better, right? They're going to learn from our actions as lawyers engaging with AI-driven, AI-powered legal tech. They're going to improve, and they're going to get better. And so the question, I guess, is, are we training these tools to the point where they will no longer be something that empowers us, but truly can just do the work? And so almost like the coders that help develop a really good coding AI program that then replaces the need for a coder. Is there a version of this where this technology becomes so powerful and benefits so much from lawyers interacting with them that they really do just replace or completely eliminate the need for significant amounts of complicated legal work?
Well, the short answer is yes. And that's a scary yes. But in some ways it's inevitable. And it seems scary because we think that like people will hear my answer and think that means replacing lawyers. And I'm going back to what I said originally, which is under our current job description, that's not all there is, right? There's a lot of tasks that we do that shouldn't require as much time as it does. Due diligence is like a perfect example of that. There's a lot of busy work involved in that. That is not higher level analysis or strategy or, thoughtfulness that goes into it. There is sometimes with details. So I don't want to discount that. Like when you're doing due diligence, there might be details that occur to you that, cross-referencing things leads to that. Well, hold on a second. I didn't see that connection before. So there certainly is that too. But we can't trick ourselves into thinking that the companies that are involved in providing products to us are not thinking about that. We've already had the experience of the social media companies and kind of going into it enthusiastic and energetic about technology, and this is so cool. And then having companies utilize our personal information in ways we never thought of. My concern is that some of the larger companies that are getting a lot of traction and momentum, it's a clear value proposition to their shareholders and investors that by wrapping their products around lawyers, they'll learn from lawyers what lawyers do and then be able to compete with them. Now, they're not going to say that. And it might not even be like a explicit call to action for them right now, but it's an inevitable one because once they have all that information, they have to provide value to the shareholders, right? It's not a fiduciary relationship with lawyers. It's a fiduciary relationship to their investors. And how do you make the most money? That's the number one rule, the golden rule. And so we need to be cognizant of that. We also need to think within that world, like you're thinking, and you mentioned earlier, how do we provide value? Like what is our highest and best use as a lawyer with experience and expertise? And I have to tell you, there's plenty of work out there. And there's plenty of need from people for that expertise.
Let me come back in a minute to the law firm's perspective. I do want to get your take on how do law firms adapt in this environment. But before we do that, I want to come at this at a slightly different approach. You are a technical founder. You've developed legal tech tools. I see you're adding features all the time. And if we were to approach this question from the perspective of a founder, someone who has a startup or a legal tech offering, from that perspective, is there a path here where the tools are developed first to help the law firm lawyer, but then eventually these tools are really being sold to the client once they're so good, right? Let's assume there's some 3 to 5 time horizon where the tools get really, really good at what they do. Is the law firm sort of like a current state go-to-market strategy? And then the long-term state is a lot of these tools are just being sold to an in-house lawyer like myself. Or is that the wrong way to think about it? Because maybe and this is how we could bring in the law firm perspective. Maybe they adapt. Maybe they change somehow how they offer legal services so that they're not in some way just sort of the funnel. They stay in the heat of the whole thing.
Yeah. So I have lots to say about that. I actually wrote an article recently called The Transformation Triangle, which is my thesis for how business writ large works going forward. And the idea, the triangle, is that you have software, services, and education. Those three things are the heart of any sustainable business going forward. What does that mean? It means law firms are now software companies. They're also education companies, which they've already been in terms of marketing. Like when you get out there, you write an ebook, you have a podcast, you have seminars, educational marketing. And so, Bob Ambrogi famously pointed out, and I really loved it because it really crystallized this idea. There was a Venn diagram of like tech and law, and they used to be not overlapping. And then, you had the cloud and stuff, and they started to overlap. And the overlapping meant that a lot of these tech tools and usage was critical to performing your job as a lawyer. And now, given the fact that large language models are trained on language and lawyers are all about language, the Venn diagrams now completely overlap each other. The consequence of that is all law firms are now software companies. And in addition to that, according to my thesis, they're also like education companies. I might be wrong. My thesis might be wrong, but this is actually how I am walking the walk because I do believe this. And that to be successful as a business that is going to be sustainable, you need to be educating people about what to do. You need to be providing tools that can work for you when you're not always there. And then you provide your services. And these three things overlap each other. And yes, the tools, like you mentioned at the top, to come back to that, I think lawyers and law firms that create managed services software that they could provide to clients so that those clients could get the benefit of their expertise and experience, even when there's not enough lawyers to service them, that's going to be critical to establishing a sticky relationship with those clients where they look to you and not someone else. And also you get to make money while you sleep because you can't always be there.
What you're describing to me sounds almost like a tech/consultancy with a law license.
Yeah. And I think for lawyers, we really need to be open-minded about this and think outside the box and really think about what we do and what value we offer to clients. Not through the lens of this is the way I do things, right? Don't view it that way. Try to get into the shoes of the client and what they need. As Professor Richard Susskind has famously said across decades, it's way ahead of the curve of all of us, is that people don't want to drill. They want the hole in the wall or they want the nail that they can hang a picture on. What they really want to see is they want to see a photo of them with their family on a happy day. That's what they want. They don't want the tool, right? And so we need to think about how to deliver that value to our clients in the best, most effective way and not get caught up in, am I using a hammer? Am I using a nail? Am I using a ratchet? That's not the point. That's not going to be sustainable. It's about delivering the results, that is.
I will have to have someone on who can provide a big law kind of perspective on this question. But Tom, I don't know if this is something you feel comfortable commenting on, but how does the current partnership structure of a law firm make that possible? Meaning, if you don't see rules get more lax around corporate ownership or corporate structures of law firms, can law firms as currently constructed as partnerships that cannot have equity investors, can they make the kind of transformation you're describing?
The answer is yes, they can. But, and there's a big but there, is that the incentives are against them, right?
Mm.
The traction is against them. The momentum is against them because when you have a partnership like that, it's in the financial interest of the partnership to not do that. It's not that it's a bad thing. It might be bad for the business, but it's not like the partners are like conspiring or something against it. It's just that
Yeah.
naturally, all of us as human beings, we have a good thing and we want to continue in the good thing. And changing things up it takes a lot of energy, and it's not built that way. It's built to be like a solid foundation where you have juniors coming up, and then ones that could produce the most business get promoted to partnership because they can continue to build the business. It's like a bridge, and you're putting like planks in front of each other to continue building that bridge to value for your clients. But the problem is it's built on the billable hour. And so the foundations of that bridge are becoming brittle and disappearing. So you're building this bridge and you're continuing to build it because you're only looking at the plank in front of you, but you're not seeing that the foundation of that bridge is falling away. And the falling away is that the billable hour is getting compressed. As it gets compressed, and in that kind of frame of mind, in that kind of partnership model, the need for juniors doing what they do right now, yes, is going to lessen. So they're probably not going to hire as many juniors, which is going to look good to them because their profit per partner is going to go up.
In the short term.
And yeah, in the short term, they're going to be like, happy day. This is amazing. Great time to be doing this. But it's kind of like when you're at the beach and the tide goes out and you're like, oh, there's some shells there I've never seen before. And it looks really pretty. I could explore where I've never explored before, but lo and behold, there's a tsunami that's coming. And if you can't put the signs together, then you might get wiped out.
I don't know if I have a good explanation or theory on why this is the case, but I have observed working at large corporate law firms and being around them my whole career, a time horizon issue where I don't see actions taken to invest in long-term payoff. There seems to be something about the structure of law firms that incentivizes a slightly shorter term thinking than I see in other sophisticated for-profit organizations. And it seems to me like the kinds of things you were talking about, the kind of digital transformation or the rethinking, frankly, of what a lawyer requires a sort of long-term horizon, no?
Well, the long-term, short-term thing, it's a bit mixed for me. It depends on your perspective, because I think partnerships and kind of the traditional approach to the practice of law is in some ways long-term. The change isn't made necessarily now because this is how we've always done it and that's been reliable. And the risk aversion of that from a good standpoint, right? Especially like tech progressives like us, I think that's fair to say. Look at risk
I'll
aversion.
carry that. I'll carry that proudly. Sure.
But I think we tend to look at risk aversion as a bad thing. And it's done very well for lawyers for many, many years. And the reason why is because if you make a decision, there could be risk involved and it might turn out badly, but you also get to see over a number of years and decades, like how things play out. So things kind of smooth out, right? Because you get to see how others have done it. You see what the risk is involved, and then you can make like carefully strategic decisions that aren't as risky because you're looking at longer time horizons in how things play out, as opposed to like the startup mentality of like fail fast, where and I hate that phrase because it's not about winning or failing. It's about actually learning. And the whole learning process is that we learn through experimentation. So I think the way of framing experimentation as a win-lose proposition is frankly kind of weird. We don't do that to little kids when they're playing in the sandbox. We don't go like, you're losing, man, get up with your game. It's about them figuring things out. And so I think that's what we need to focus on, is moving from like a long-term risk averse mentality to how do we learn as quickly as possible now?
What you just said made me think about another aspect of being a lawyer, the substantive part. And I've been an antitrust lawyer 16 years. And as an antitrust lawyer, and I know, of course, senior lawyers who have been doing it for 30, 35, 40 years. And when there are major developments in the antitrust space, there's absolutely a longer term view taken by senior attorneys, and they understand that things change here and there, but over the long term, there's a sort of stability and predictability to how antitrust laws are enforced. So that even when you have moments where you think that a lot is changing fast, lawyers with a longer term horizon, I think rightfully from experience, see, like you said, that evening out. And I wonder whether that mentality mapped to technology is a dangerous combination, because at some point there is a cliff effect, right, with technology. And not always, but at some point you can have technology that can create significant disruption. And somehow the legal industry has avoided that kind of major impact. But I think that's what we're up against. I think that's where we are, is the major shift, a major churn as a result of a huge development in technology as it applies to the law. And so I wonder whether there's a mismatch in that approach that works really well as a lawyer and advising on the law maybe doesn't match up very nicely to thinking strategically about your business.
100%. 100%. One of my tenets now is that every lawyer and law firm is now a software company.
Yeah.
So if that's true, if we take that seriously, then this kind of like long-term, risk-averse strategy is inappropriate. Like that just doesn't work. We have to dive in and we have to figure it out. Early on, I was a big advocate for experimentation, use ChatGPT, Claude, play around with it. But we're far beyond that at this point. For those that haven't gotten into it, don't feel put off by that. Still jump into it, experiment. That's always the first step. But I think people that have been doing that all along now, we're at the point of practical implementations in very deep ways of having AI integrated, like you were mentioning earlier, into workflows. But that's only the beginning. This kind of like deep integration that I was hinting at with becoming proactive in clients' operations, that's actually something that was part of my thesis. I've been doing interviews with people that are out in the world, transformation officers, and this is actually playing out, A lot of people are having the same ideas. And so this is a transformation that's taking place right now.
Yeah, I've been reaching out to contacts at law firms, and really fascinating to see the different ways that law firms are reacting right now. Can't wait to see how the next couple of years play out. Tom, I've seen your sort of branding around LawDroid, even the name LawDroid. I pick up a futurism vibe from you. So if we could put on our futurism hat on for a second, I would love to just sort of have you paint the picture of 3 years from now, 5 years from now, a law firm that's tech forward, tech enabled, that really has thought hard about how to integrate technology into automating their work, but also into their strategy. What does a day look like for that lawyer? What does a week look like? What are the attributes of that kind of real tech forward firm, as opposed to maybe someone who's more of a laggard and sticking to their old ways?
Wow. People love predictions, right? The weird thing though, is that I think this transition is going to happen over the next 5 years. It's not going to be like back in the day with the internet, where it took 10, maybe 20 years for everyone to get into it, especially for lawyers and law firms. There's just so much going on right now. It's not just the tech, right? Remember the transformation triangle of software, services, and education. And we see outside of traditional lawyers and law firms, there's lots of people banging at the gate. There's states that are experimenting with regulation. Washington State, by the way, is jumping into that now too, in addition to Arizona, Utah, and Washington, D.C. allowing for non-lawyer ownership, and others, Puerto Rico now, same thing. So there's lots of opportunities for non-licensed organizations to get into this game. We just saw that in the news. Singular, it's a law firm in Arizona, got purchased by LawHive, and LawHive also purchased a law firm in the UK, an SRL. There's a lot going on, and people are trying to figure out the right way to pursue this, the right, organization, the right legal structure. And especially with the regulatory posture right now at a federal level, it's very laissez-faire. So the doors are open for people to do this kind of experimentation. So what do I think? I think that that's the trend. It's going towards legal service companies that are eventually publicly owned, like a LegalZoom, but with lawyers directly employed by it. They do currently have an outside law firm, but I won't get into all the details on that. But legal service companies that are vertically integrated, work across different industries with different clients, highly integrated into those clients' business operations on a daily basis. You walk into a firm, they either literally or figuratively have a server wing with AI working on the details. They have, an army of legal engineers that are creating the map, connecting the dots between those different actions that AI is taking and analyzing, and strategic needs of the clients and the firm. But that's the technical part. The part that's most important is that, yes, it's a people person industry, and like having those human relationships with the clients where people get to go out, have face-to-face meetings, learn more about the psychological dynamics of what's going on with what people need and why. Those motivations are even more important than the technical legal analysis, and help to frame it. And so all of that stuff that's really humanly necessary is actually going to be empowered by this, because people will be able to put more time into that. So I know it's really broad strokes, but that's where I see things going.
Let me wrap us up by coming back to the students. I'm an optimist, Tom. I also believe in the young people always. I know that they're going to figure it out. And so I'm just be curious to hear your thoughts on your students from their perspective. How do they view this whole thing shaking out right now for them personally? Do you see the optimism, or do you see concern? What is the sentiment of young people who are being trained to be the next lawyers?
Well, I can only speak to my students, and the class that I taught, really impressive young people. I get to call them kids because I'm 50 plus now. So, but no, they're very impressive, and the enthusiasm and excitement they have about the change that's happening, and some reservations. Let's be honest. But I think that they have a very good grasp on how things are playing out. Kind of like David Bowie, right? They're well aware of what's going on, and they're taking advantage of it. Like one student who works for the Coast Guard, immediately after the class, he created a chatbot that helped veterans to get information about benefits and actually apply for them, right?
Huh.
So like from experimentation with, in one of my classes, the LawDroid platform, where you could build your own like custom chatbots, he learned how to do that. And then he went out and on his own created a chatbot to help fellow veterans and those in the military get these services. That's the empowerment here. That's the beauty of it, is that this stuff unlocks people's individual abilities to just make things happen, improve the world for others. And that's really what we should be focusing on, is that the more that we can include people, the better.
Yeah, I could see a rebranding or rethinking of what a legal education is and what does it mean to be a practicing lawyer. As you're telling me that story, I'm imagining the contrast of the image of a lawyer I grew up on, which is someone in a suit going in a court and filing some big case on behalf of someone who was injured in a big products liability case or something like that. That's the sort of hero, right? That's the lawyer as a hero. What you're describing is a different version. It's a very different image, actually. It's a student who went home with a laptop and developed a program and solved the problem, the real problem that is inspiring and important. Maybe we have to, as part of this in law schools, I think probably have to rethink what is the story we tell around being someone who has a legal education and is out helping people with that.
I think the number one thing to take away from that is, as my friend Professor Catman at Vanderbilt has advocated for years, is client-focused design, like clients first. If you focus on the client first, that'll solve most things.
As a client for some law firms, I couldn't agree more. Tom, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a really interesting conversation. Where can people find you? Tell us how to follow your expertise and also some of the interesting products that you're putting out into the world.
Well, thank you. They could definitely keep in touch. I'd like them to follow me on lawdroidmanifesto.com. That's my Substack. I write a lot there. So lawdroidmanifesto.com is a great place to keep in touch with me. And lawdroid.com is the software company that provides different types of products for lawyers to make their lives a bit easier.
Excellent. And you use some very neat image generating tool, because I feel like your graphics and images always have a very cool kind of futuristic edge to them. I don't know which tool you use, but I always like the imagery around your posts.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I do use AI for that, but ultimately it comes down to human taste and curation, because you get to choose which one is the one that you want and to make changes to it. So like that maps over to the practice of law. There's tools that help technically, but ultimately it's about your taste, your expertise, and your curation, your ability to choose which one is the better thing. That is still extremely important.
I love that. That's a great analogy. Thank you, Tom, for coming on. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to following you, seeing where you take us next.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Version Up with me, Kai Roska, and music by Brett Ryback.